And just like that, middleweight set the table up near the top of the card. The co-main event of the evening, it's Joe Pyfer, a.k.a. Body Bags. He's going to be taking on Abdul Razak Alhassan, originally out of Ghana. And for Alhassan, Matt, he broke the trend. He was 11-5 with 11 first-round knockout wins. And by golly, by gosh, by jeepers. His last time out, second-round knockout victory, a first for the now 38-year-old fighter. He was able to get it done in the second round against Claudio Ribeiro. And Alhassan's one of those really interesting fighters. If it goes past the first round, we're talking about the Yago zone. But he was able to do the unthinkable. And once he was able to figure out the movement, the odd angle punches for the boxer being Ribeiro, and some of those big head kicks, he was able to close the distance and shut the lights out. And Alhassan's an interesting guy also because you always see it if you peruse the web pages, if you watch his fights in the regional scene, you see Judo Thunder thrown out there as a tagline. He was a judo black belt really early on in life. You see him sometimes on his Instagram in the gi, working that judo, but
I love the nickname personally.
You don't see it in the UFC as the nickname, and you don't see him utilize that in his fights. And sometimes you do, but not often do you. And we've seen him struggle in the takedowns. We think back to that Jacob Malkoun fight, couldn't get out from under, couldn't absorb illegal elbows like Malkoun was able to dish out against Cody Brundage. But for Abdul Razak Alhassan, it's a lot of moving forward, plodding forward, cutting distance with his hooks, and once he gets you back behind the black line, we're going red line revs. So for Alhassan, now he gets to take on the taller, the rangier Joe Pyfer, which is nothing new for Abdul Razak Alhassan, the former welterweight. And for Joe Pyfer, again, you think back to his last loss. We're trying to post up. We're dislocating the arm. We're taking on a tough fighter in Dustin Stoltzfus. But since then, wins over Austin,
knocking people down.
Austin Trotman, Ozzy Diaz, Alan Amadovsky, and Gerald Mearshart. And then to add insult to injury, to put salt in that wound, out was his originally scheduled opponent for grappling at Fury Pro, and in is friggin' Gerald Mearshart. It wasn't a great matchup, but Pyfer won by decision. So back-to-back wins over Gerald Mearshart, and Pyfer's into this fight, Matt. And now, when you look at a fight like this, I think body attacks for Joe Pyfer, the in-close shots for a longer, rangier guy are pretty good for Joe Pyfer. You saw that against Ozzy Diaz on Contender Series, but I know you were high on Pyfer, and listen, I mean, the cat out of the bag, we both enjoy an Abdul Razak Alhassan fight as well. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun while it lasts. And it makes your Louis Smolka effect, like there's a lot of these effects, but you pucker your butthole a little bit when you have a couple of knockout artists like these.
I'm happy the UFC gave Joe Pyfer a fighter like Abdul Razak Alhassan, because when you beat somebody like Gerald Mearshart, you would assume you get that big step up in competition, right? Just a well-known name. He's been able to turn away a lot of high-level prospects in the past. So for Pyfer, it was one of those matchups where you kind of worry, hey, is a win here almost the worst thing moving forward for him? Because they're going to throw him in there with a bunch of really high-level fighters, so you can never really take a step back from that. And again, not saying Abdul Razak Alhassan's an easier fight by any means, but I don't necessarily look at him as a big step up from Gerald Mearshart. Like, they're very different fighters stylistically, I would say. But where they are in the division, they're both outside the top 15, but can offer difficult fights to anybody. I think Gerald Mearshart's probably going to offer you a more difficult fight, especially if it goes past the first round. But for Alhassan, can he make Joe Pyfer pay at the long distance? Because a lot of Pyfer's good work does come from his boxing combinations up close when he is able to incorporate the body shots. And for Alhassan, he does get a little bit wild with some of his strikes on the outside, but I think it's going to give him the best opportunity to win the fight, because if it does get up close, it's not going to allow him to throw the kicks with nearly as much range as we've seen in some of his fights, and that head kick's probably his best weapon, if not top 3, I would say. It really does allow him to extend his own range, and it's wild too. Like, this is a guy who fought at 170, fighting at 185, and he's not a small guy. Like, he's muscled up. He's not tall for the division by any means, but he's a pretty big guy at 185, and I do think he's going to be able to strike at least power-wise with Joe Pyfer from that long distance. It's just up close, I think it's going to negate a lot of the better tools he does have at his disposal, whereas Joe Pyfer is going to be able to maybe even threaten with the takedown and then start to use a lot of those body shots. And I'm glad you bring them up, because I do think they're going to be a big key to the matchup. If he can make Alhassan tired, even earlier in the first round than what we've seen in the past, it's just going to help him win that much easier.
I worry with Joe Pyfer again. For Alhassan, tricky with his sidewinding, either body kick or head kick. And when you look at a guy like Joe Pyfer too, where's the hand placement going to be? Where his defense is going to be? Because Alhassan's one of those guys, if he hits you quick to the body and you take some time to bring those hands down, then he just comes up top with the big hooks and that's all she wrote. And when you look at it for Alhassan, even in the losses, he only has 5. He only has 17 pro fights, and we know the reasons behind the long layoff that he did succumb to, but the loss to Chaos Williams, the loss to Jacob Malkoun, but even going back to the Munir-Lazzez fight for Alhassan, blitzes. You think he's going to win the first round, it's going to be over, and then he kind of expended the gas tank in the first and couldn't do much of anything in the second and the third. But Alhassan, a little bit resurgent at Fortis MMA for the longest time, at Elevation Fight Team, and we finally saw him break through and get that second round finish last time out against a big long-range striker with power in Claudio Ribeiro. So the big favorite is Joe Pyfer. As I mentioned, on this main card, a lot of big favorites. And on our last card, the Fiziev Gamrot fight, there were a lot of big favorites that didn't actually make it through and get the win. We have a look at the Topology votes. Matt, surprised us there to you. This is probably going to be, and if you don't know, now you know type of fight. Probably going to be one of those fights. And if the mic didn't catch that, if you don't know, now you know. They can throw it as many as they want. But yeah.
But just know Muhammad Usman's probably going to be involved in at least one of them.
Frigate Friday, and if you don't know, now you know. Catchy stuff, Matt. I'm going to say over-under 87.5% Pyfer.
Over.
And it is over. 1,131 total votes, 92% Pyfer, 81% by decision. For the 8% that have Alhassan, 80% by knockout. So, sorry, 81% by knockout Pyfer, 80% knockout for Alhassan. I have Joe Pyfer in the matchup. Knockout or submission, I think.
I think I'll win by stoppage. It should be a fun fight for as long as it lasts, because both guys do have tremendous power. I just think Joe Pyfer's a little bit cleaner with his technique up close, and I think that's where this fight's primarily going to be contested.
Watch out for the kicks of Alhassan to make a big difference, and if he's going to go out there, body kick to a hook, and if you look at it for Pyfer, to evade those and land with the counter shots. Matt, a big-time matchup in this loaded, all of a sudden, middleweight division. Both of us going with Joe Pyfer to get the win, and that brings us to the lightweight main event. We have Bobby Green looking to jump back into the top 15. He's going to be taking on Grant Dawson. You're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.